Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel session, which has the very exciting task today of discussing and, dare I say, making some realistic sense of the challenge of creating an enabling framework for the third sector. My name is Raymond O'Hare, and it's my privilege to be asked to chair this session and spend time with and learn from our three fantastic and experienced panellists: Carolyn Soares, CEO of the Cora Foundation; Dan Such, who's the Director of CAST, which is the Centre for the Acceleration of Social Technology; and last but by no means least, Chris Ashworth, who is Head of Social Impact at Nominet. So welcome to all of you, all three of you, and thank you very much for being here today to discuss this pretty big topic, I think. Now, to get started, let me be completely frank with everyone here, and what I'm about to say is based on my personal experiences working across the private, the public, and the third sectors. The idea that you can simply create a framework or an infrastructure which can be shared by all of the third sector, big and small, is a pretty unrealistic goal. The same way that asking any number of excellent technology companies to come and work together, collaborate, and come up with technology solutions which work for the good of all of the sector. It just doesn't work like that. But Dan Such, am I being too cynical and too negative here?
I don't think so. I think the sector is proudly and fiercely independent. There's a huge amount of variety in size, focus, geography, all sorts, experience, why individual charities or organisations were set up. But there is a lot of commonality as well. And so I wonder if we think about how can you find those frameworks or that kind of shared infrastructure, if you start from the points that are shared, those commonalities, then there is a possibility. But they might be different commonalities from other sectors. So I think it's right to say it's very difficult. We won't be able to kind of create an infrastructure or a framework that everyone will align with because of the way in which people adopt things and are attracted to kind of start identifying things that work with them. But if we look at some of the values of aligned impact, kind of sharing, being kind of generous with one another, wanting to see kind of the whole sector improve, then there are ways in which we can find frameworks that allow us all to progress collectively, as well as ensuring we're benefiting our own work.
Yeah, okay. Carolyn, from your experience, I mean, have you seen kind of positive examples of, the kind of collaboration either across the third sector or across the tech sector that we could all learn from?
Yeah, I think there's a few areas of collaboration that stand out for me in this sector. If you're working in the third sector in Scotland and you're looking for a job, you're probably going to go on Good Moves, which is a shared bit of infrastructure that we all use to find employment in the sector that we love. If you're looking for funding, which is the business that I'm in, and you're a third sector organisation, you might well go on Funding Scotland, or you might use another shared bit of kind of tech that charities and voluntary sector organisations look to use for funding. So I think there are a couple of standout examples. I think, as we're perhaps beginning to talk about, for me, I think the interesting area to develop is, well, what are the more deeper collaborative examples that might be more deeply connected to the work that charities and voluntary organisations do, the actual difference that they make in people's lives, and how might collaborating around digital infrastructure enable more effective and efficient kind of work in that field as well.
Yeah, fair point. Chris, I mean, I realise it's unrealistic to, I feel like, try to boil the ocean on something like this, obviously. But I mean, can we even heat up the River Clyde or some of the other rivers around here, obviously, and get some good examples like what Carolyn's talking about there? Are there a number of other areas where we could actually sort of attack, quite immediately?
Yeah, I think it's worth noting, Raymond, as you said, there's to break that topic down to really sort of understand what do we mean by collaboration, what do we mean by shared services, shared resources, because there's a huge amount that already exists. So whether you're looking at front end or back end. So I think we've discussed previously the fact that Salesforce exists, Just Giving exists. All of those different types of services, PayPal exists, that just a decade or two ago, weren't in anybody's mind's eye, that have revolutionized how, a single charity or third sector organization can engage with users in every corner of the country. So things are different to where they were. And then in terms of, I think, where Well, there's a point to make which I think is important, that there is a natural fragmentation of the third sector for good reason. It's both one of its strengths and one of its limitations, but that doesn't mean that we should just be in the business of imitating what we see and celebrate in local government or the private sector, because it's different for a reason. And we should kind of accept and celebrate that. But then in terms of, is there more that can be done in specific areas, then I'd definitely point towards the world of data and front-end data, so open referrals. I'd look at shared learning and resources. We've had some real joy and insight, I think, around pattern libraries, and I know Dan's done quite a lot of work on those, where larger organizations or collaboratives can come together to design around the fundamentals of a service, so that a smaller organization doesn't need to start from scratch. And that effectively, that digital research, that digital learning can be shared for the benefit of everybody. So I think there's loads of examples, but I'd be thinking about learning, and I'd be thinking about front-end data and referrals, where there are some big opportunities.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's clear that the third sector has many needs in many areas where they're maybe short of important skills or short of experience or resources. And now I know, and I want to say this with respect, but I know that many companies of all types and shapes and sizes, if you like, provide support, they provide funding, they provide resources to a wide range of charities. But do we always get the things that we need the most from these generous supporters? Chris, what do you think on that?
Oh, no would be my first answer, and I think that probably comes from years and years of. I'm on the other side of that fence now, desperately trying not to offer things people don't want. But I think there's again, built into the natural DNA of the sector, there's a power imbalance when it comes to working with, or a perceived power imbalance when it comes to working with the private sector. And so, the offer of volunteering for a day in the organisation by some well-meaning corporate clients usually is more pain than gain. So, and I think we've said for a long time, aside from just digital infrastructure, that honesty and openness around what is really needed, and then transposing those points into the digital age, for me, would be, what does digital trustees who can join remotely, who can bring those skills, what does micro volunteering look like? What does skills matching look like? What does a responsible business network do for organizations where it can work in the long term on things that really matter, as opposed to painting fences? A finance director painting a fence in a local school is not a best use of anybody's time.
No, that's a fair point. Carolyn, would you have a similar experience of this?
Yeah, I'm just smiling there because, there's so many brilliant skills in, businesses, across Scotland and elsewhere that charities, voluntary organisations can hugely benefit from. But, as we were just saying there, what you don't need is a crack legal team, painting the toilets a new colour this week. I think the key to this, I suppose, is to really embed the idea that there's a sort of parity of respect between the third sector and the private sector, and actually to respect one another for the different skills and experience that we have. Big charities are big organisations. They're great at doing loads of things. They're managing people, they're managing money, they're managing volunteers. They love when people come in from the private sector with expertise to share. Expertise that respects that the charity, our voluntary organisation is really great at supporting the people that it's supporting, but might need a bit of, perhaps this month we're looking for HR advice, perhaps legal advice, perhaps digital and kind of tech advice, and it's about having a parity of respect and exchange between the organisations, actually, which I think kind of really underpins the real progression together, perhaps over time.
Yeah, when you both say that, it just makes complete sense. Why would you have people who are experts in technology, legal matters, financial matters, they're probably not experts in painting fences or planting trees, actually. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. Dan, from your point of view, is there a mechanism currently that kind of ensures that the needs of the sector are being matched properly with what companies' resources are? I mean, what's in place at the moment on that?
Yeah, there are some, but let's just explore the challenge of doing it well, which is we operate in a resource-light environment. So we're always looking for more resources to be attracted to the sector. And if a financial director comes along with a pot of paint, well, I do need that thing painted. So that I want to take advantage of that. Now, it might not be the best use of their time to benefit me, but it's still a useful thing that helps me progress. Mm-hmm. And when we're often we're looking for these opportunities and people are offering something, we're very quick to go, that we can help, we can use that, rather than say, how can we align this really well? How can we organise it so we're all collectively making the best use of the resources that are available? And that's difficult to organise because we're proudly independent. So how do we best align the different resources that are available to make the most kind of collective progress? Well, there are a couple of things that seem to work. There are some great kind of matching services. The Scottish Tech Army is one. There are organisations like Agencies for Good that will share briefs between them and kind of share ideas so they can kind of respond best together. There are brilliant kind of matching work by corporates like Deloitte with the Deloitte Digital Connect program. There are good examples of this happening. What tends to really underpin it, though, is where there's a shared framework that is thinking about kind of collective progress rather than just helping an individual charity make progress. And that's about thinking about how do we create things that are open source, or how do we share learning, how do we make sure things are available to be reused by others, so that where one person does benefit from a particular set of expertise or resource, how can others also benefit from it in some way?
Yeah. Are there things there at the moment that prevent that from happening? Chris, in your experience, like the idea of saying if there's something there, you think, well, look, this could benefit a lot more people. What would tend to stop that then from actually benefiting a lot more people?
I think there's and it probably applies in the commercial sector and local government as well in many ways. But I think that we talk about, if we talk about the building blocks of the charity sector, and we talk and we perceive all of the organisations as bricks in the wall, and it's the mortar in between that holds it together. And there is perhaps a paucity of resource. There's few organisations such as CAST who are utterly incredible but exist as part of that glue. There's SCVO, there's NCVO, there's business in the community. But it's in those anchor organisations, and I should say as well as a funder, the responsibility of funder organisations to provide some of that glue so that there's sustainable, systemic opportunities where collaboration can be bedded in. Exactly to Dan's point there that, some of that shared infrastructure, Agencies for Good, DataKind, our own Reboot platform, you can create shared infrastructure, but it's got to be sustained for it to be tested, for it to be useful. So there are pockets of examples, but I think that it's the likes of funders and anchor organisations that need to provide that central glue more often than maybe we do at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. I mean, I'm keen that what we try and do, although I sounded slightly negative in my opening comments, it was just to kind of try and provoke a response, really, which obviously you've absolutely given me. But I mean, I'm keen that we do try and leave people after this session with a kind of positive mindset, really, and that they know that things, they can be improved. Progress and improvement is definitely possible, and it definitely sounds possible from the things that all three of you are saying. But I'm just wondering what's there's presumably a range of things that you could tackle. What would be the most obvious things to tackle first? I'm interested in your views that, whether there would be a consensus or a common view that, look, if we could solve those one or two things, it would make a real difference in the sector. Caroline, do you want to have a crack
I get the first crack at that? Well, let's see if we can get a great list together between us. I hope that we can. I mean, three things that come into my mind. One, just building what Chris was saying there, I think, speaking as a funder, we're a foundation that gives grants to other charities and voluntary groups. I think, there's something about the way that charities and voluntary organisations compete for funding, that, you know, I think it's okay for perhaps me to kind of acknowledge that as a bit of an elephant in the room, that can work against the kind of collaboration that we're just speaking about if third sector organisations are competing for money. So perhaps, you know, one of those things on my list might be more collaboration between funders, which I think would be a big prize and would support more collaborative work in general, because, you know, third sector organisations are competing for money, they're competing for credit, they're competing for volunteers sometimes, and all of that undermines the kind of wider sense of progress. The other and so I think organisations working together on shared aims and funders backing that is really important. The other two things that are in my mind where I'm kind of excited about the potential, one is one thing all third sector organisations do is try and track the difference that they're making, and that's usually about tracking individual outcomes for people who are taking part in activities or receiving support, and a lot of that, you know, as Dan said earlier, is really kind of, you know, bespoke to the organisation, but actually there are common underpinning similarities between that. So that feels like an area where there could be great collaboration between third sector organisations for the best tools to do that job. And then just more broadly, managing data. There's a huge amount of data in this sector. As a funder, people often talk about funders sort of sitting on a gold mine of data, and how can you open that up and make it more transparent and available for analysis, for understanding and for learning. And those feel like areas to me where we've got some great ideas in this room, and I'm sure in the broader room, that we might be able to take forward.
Yeah. Fair point. The data thing in particular, you're right, because it's a challenge and an opportunity that everybody has. The raw material is there, and it's just how do we be slicker, and how do we make it easier for people to do that? Dan, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think the big opportunity is to really make the most of what already exists within the sector. And for me, we encapsulate that by the term a culture of reuse, which sounds like a big thing to try and change. Like, how do we encourage more reuse of the things that already exist? So how do we do that practically? We tackle the two big disincentives that currently exist. So the first is when people are starting new projects, often trying to attract funding. The arguments we're making at that point are, we're the only people that can do this. We're the right organisation to receive the resources to get on with it. No one else can possibly do this. No one's done it in the past. This is new for us. And we attract resources to get it in. So there's the first disincentive to say, what already exists? What can I build on? At the end of a piece of work, where we've got something wonderful that's really valuable for the rest of the sector, we're now thinking about where else can we access funding for, how can we keep it sustainable. We're looking elsewhere, not thinking about how we share that. So how do we address those two big disincentives? And I think it's a role for funders to help kind of kickstart this culture of reuse. During the early application phase, where charities are looking to start new things, we say, how can we encourage them to look for what already exists, to build on stuff that other charities have created, community technologies, things that the sector already own? How can we privilege that work and not say, well, if you're using something that exists, we're going to reduce the amount of money. We're going to actively encourage you to do it. And then at the end of a piece of work, or even all the way through, actively support organisations to share what they're doing, both the learning that Chris mentioned earlier on, the impact and measurements that Caroline's mentioned, all the things that are being created so they're ready to be reused again. Wow. Now, really practically, there's a role for funders there saying, we're going to open up the IP of anything that we're funding. We're going to put within our grant conditions that we're going to support you to do something wonderful, but we're going to make the stuff available for others to benefit from too. That's going to hit our objectives as funders, because it's going to mean our money goes further. We're going to put in support to help organisations find stuff that exists, help understand that glue work, and help them to share at the end. And that's where we have people like Scottish Tech Army, we have all the agencies, we have kind of Dovetail, we have the Catalyst Network, all ready to help that. And if we can establish that culture of reuse, then we make the most of what already exists, and we keep on contributing to it, built on the ethics and the values of our sector.
Yeah. Chris, I mean, just building on what Dan had said there, I mean, how easy or how difficult will it be to convince the sector overall that they should do more in this? You know, they need to sort of try to work together a bit more, as opposed to just saying, well, we've got this thing now, it's a bit of an edge for us. And I appreciate the issue around funding. You know, if you're competing for funding, it sometimes makes it very difficult to kind of aspire to these other, things that we'd like to do. But we need to put something into the system, if you like.
No, I don't think they're in competition. I think exactly as Dan says, that let's celebrate reuse. So there's an obligation on funders, and I have to say, some of the most exciting and innovative programs that I've funded in the last few years have embedded that culture of reuse, and that consideration of where the wider opportunities are, they've been absolutely the best programs we've funded. So I love receiving a proposal, a detailed proposal where those sorts of things have been really thought out. So I think you start from the principle of, let's remember what makes us unique in the sector is that charity and benevolence are at the heart of what we do. Let's extend that principle in this area. That's not a big, difficult leap of faith. The concept of all boats rise, I think, is really important, particularly in a digital age, because the opportunity is there. That's the potential, the transformative potential of technology, is to create something that can suddenly catch fire and be used in so many other places. So very practically, as Dan says, Creative Commons, shared IP. If I could just give a couple of brief examples.
Sure.
I've worked a lot with the Samaritans over the last 4 or 5 years. And we began by creating an intelligent dashboard for the 20,000 volunteers. So they could operate their shifts much better, knowing whether they need to be on the phone, on email, now on online chat. And that system to make them more efficient and make sure they're reaching people who are reaching out to them, in emotional distress, get the support that they need and get the listening service that they need. The technology that's underpinned the intelligent dashboard, we've now made sure that's available to Nightline, which is the student organisation, also providing the same type of service. And that's something that both Samaritans and Nightline are really celebrating, because that's an opportunity to make sure that the people who need them the most are there for them. Yeah. And then on the other side, on in the other part of the digital world, digital skills, we've been working with the Scouts to build an adult digital skills volunteering platform. And I think CAST were part of those discussions as they progressed. We've made sure that platform on digital skills for adult volunteers is available to white label for any charity that has large amounts of volunteers who want and need to improve their digital skills. That's the wonderful potential of digital technology in exactly this space. I don't think we're far off. I do think there's an obligation for myself and others as funders to celebrate and encourage the fact that that's what we're looking for. Can your organisation make all boats rise? And that to me is an advantage in an application form, not a disadvantage.
Yes. I mean, they're great examples, actually. I think as well. Absolutely, and the right Samaritans and the other organisation are right to celebrate the fact that they're using something that really is making a difference, and probably can make an even wider difference in other organisations as well. I'm sure. Sticking with the technology and the digital perspective at the moment. You've talked about a couple of things already, but what are the other realistic things that we could do to accelerate some of this and to kind of kickstart some of this? You talked a little bit about or you mentioned the tech army, for example, but where are the things that can really be a bit of a catalyst for step change and sort of pace, the pace going up a bit? Carolyn, have you got some thoughts on that?
Well, the thing that comes into my mind, I suppose, is capacity to think, like thinking space. Now that, you might want to go into slightly more kind of technological side to that, and the guys can probably build on that. But just as an initial kind of step into that, actually within the third sector, having those skilled volunteers or trustees or staff members who have time, exposure to and just actually that thinking space, capacity to think, how might we collaborate, how might we develop. I think that's probably just that missing kind of first step, kind of step change that's needed, and from there any number of things come, I would hope. Dan,
do you think that, Carolyn mentioned there, trustees, is there a need for some kind of fresh new blood, if you like, and within the trustee network, if you like, across the charities? Would that make a difference if we had more tech savvy trustees coming onto boards?
Yeah, certainly. And there are loads of activities trying to recruit more tech savvy, more experienced kind of digital people onto boards. I guess that there's a challenge there, which is there's a big commitment becoming a trustee, and sometimes that doesn't fit with the people who have got those skills. So what are the other ways in which we can bring those skills in? Trustees is definitely one way. the kind of the equivalent of a NED, a non-executive director, might be another.
Yeah.
Having people you can just phone up, like Digital Candle, you can just get a call with an expert and get an hour's worth of advice for free from an expert volunteer. You mentioned what are the things that can catalyse this. I mean, the Catalyst Network is an example where there are these spaces and forums where people are having these discussions. They're coming together and sharing their learning, they're sharing their tools, they're sharing new approaches and experiments. And then critically, creating resources for others to benefit from those conversations too. So there's something about the spaces and the forums. There's something about the spaces and the resources and the tools people have access to. And then I think that final question kind of relates to trustees is, what are the skills and capabilities that every charity needs access to? Which do they need to own or have as staff members or as their trustees, and which they need access to on another basis? And I think Caroline's question is right. We need time to kind of think that through.
Right.
And we either need to kind of provide more kind of collective access to infrastructure of brilliant people like Digital Candle or Dovetail to find the right support partners, or we need to help charities attract those people into their organisations. And where that blurring is, I'm not quite sure, but we need the capacity within the sector, sometimes within charities and sometimes with access for charities.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, Chris, the things like, the tech army we've talked about, can they play a bigger impact than what they currently play, or where are the lines, if you like, in terms of how far they can push it?
I think one of the observations I'd probably make in terms of is there something that can be done quickly, cheaply, and possibly is where the sector hasn't stood up as much as it could do. And Dan mentioned earlier agencies for good. That basically is a Slack channel and began life as a Slack channel set up in an emergency during COVID pandemic of like-minded peers who knew each other from over the years through the service design sector. They said, what can we do to make something quick happen and make sure that we're responding in a collective way to the pandemic? Ultimately, it's free. It's a Slack channel of vocational experts who were already in a network. One observation over the years that I'd maybe make is there aren't necessarily enough innovation networks or in terms of vocational networks that can meet and collaborate online in a space and talk and share and collaborate informally. So the trusteeship and the a platform enabling micro volunteering or mentoring requires resource to set up, to develop, to deliver on. And some of those fantastic resources, as Dan mentioned, exists, and as Caroline mentioned. But there are equally informal power networks that could be established with somebody with a bit of will and a few people, because that can start that sort of fire. So I think that the Scottish Tech Army can definitely play a role, but I think that observations from, work a lot with the youth mental health sector and youth underemployment and social disadvantage sectors, there has sometimes been a bit of an alarming lack of collaboration in terms of vocations and business units within those charities where people, I'm surprised they don't know each other and aren't talking as much as I wish they were. Particularly in this medium to larger organisations, which tend to be networks in their own right. Yeah,
it always surprises me that actually things that you think would happen naturally based on the situation really sometimes don't, and they need to be prompted or they need to be kind of.
And now we've no excuse, to be honest. Yeah, we've got no excuse because the platforms and the ability to do so are all there and they're all free.
I'm conscious, by the way, time is running out on us, I'm afraid, and we're going to have to wrap up the session, even though I feel that there's so much more I think that we could discuss, and there's so much more we could get from the three of you. Actually, I think it would be really, really helpful and really, really useful, if we're going to try and get closer to this enabling framework for the sector. I think just one final thing I would actually ask each of you, if you were to say, advise or give a little nugget to the rest of the subsector organisations out there at the moment that maybe are not as active or proactive in some of these areas, is there one thing you would say, go look at that, go do that, just to sort of try and push us in the right direction, basically, just to sort of get the momentum going, actually? Caroline, sorry to pick on you first, but I have to pick on somebody.
Can't believe you picked on me first, and I've got about 10 things going through my mind. It's such a great question, Raymond. So, you know, just off the top of my head, I think there's something about let's meet the moment now. You know, this is the time that, you know, we're facing quite a few challenges right now. You know, in our economy and society, now is the time to be focused on the bigger prize and the bigger picture, as I'm sure we're kind of all thinking about all the time. So that kind of encouragement to have momentum and meet the moment, and to do so, no organisation is going to be doing that on their own. So it's collaborate. So, and I think the one thing I would do, and to do this with my own board, to be honest, is have that conversation about risk, because I think that, you know, third sector organisations are working alongside quite often vulnerable groups and people, and actually they can be cautious about a big development, you know, something that might be expensive or risky or a huge change. Have the conversation about risk and find friends around you in the sector who can share that risk, perhaps.
Okay, yeah, good point. Dan, from your point of view?
I think the answers are already out there. So for every individual listening to this, go and find one more community to join, one more network, one more place to find resources. If I was going to spotlight one now, it would be kind of Catalyst, the catalyst.org.uk, with all the resources and the community groups, space like the Space for Reuse, which is a service to help. The stuff's out there, so either find a community or spend some time finding the things that solve the problem that you're trying to address.
Excellent, thank you. And Chris, the last word to you.
Oh, blimey. So endorsing everything that's been just said, I would say unless your idea is extremely radical, and you know you are capable of having extremely radical, incredible ideas, but unless it's a moonshot, it probably already exists, and spend more time looking for it on the places where Dan mentioned, or asking and joining networks, and start there. And only start something completely new and novel if you've exhausted all avenues to find it elsewhere in the first place.
Yeah, good advice from all three of you, actually. And listen, a huge thank you, Caroline, Dan, and Chris, for sharing your insights and your experiences today. They've been very valuable, and I'm sure they'll be valuable to many of the people listening as well. And thanks to everybody who's watching this as well. Obviously, hopefully, you know, you'll take something from the session, even if it's just one thing, one little nugget actually, which allows you to take action and move forward. That would be a really good thing. So we'll wrap it up. Thank you again to the panel. It's been a pleasure and very interesting. I'm sure we need to continue the conversation and continue the actions that are going to come out of it as well. So thank you again.